The 2024 Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by Glossica.
Hi guys, welcome to another session today, and I would like to introduce how to make a language app, the ideas and challenges that lead to Polygloss. And before we start, please remember about Slido. You can join by QR code. We are in Slovakia room, if you don't remember that, and you can ask questions during the whole presentation, and last 50 minutes are for answers. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Right, so let's start. So hi, I'm Etienne. I'm a software engineer with many years of experience, and I love learning languages. I also love learning about languages. So on my master's, I studied computational linguistics and a lot of computer-assisted language learning. And I had to learn a lot about second language acquisition as well in that process. And I'm also neurodivergent, and I have social anxiety, so bear with me if I need to calm down a little bit. And I know this is really tricky in the process of learning languages, because overcoming this anxiety and getting to practice is, it's fundamental. If you don't practice, you don't talk. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is going to center around making this easier. Right, so the topics that I'm gonna cover today is basically the making of my app. And I'm gonna go through like the motivations of why I decided to go on this journey, the planning and the various phases of this process. I'm not gonna go a lot into the technical details, but if there are any software engineers here that want to talk about it in more fine-grained later on, like feel free to catch me on the corridor, and I will love to like spill the beans. Don't worry about that. Right, so the motivations. The first thing that happened was that I didn't simply decide to create a language app. I was sort of like forced into it, as was my single alternative of doing something at the time. I was incredibly burnt out with my previous job. I was working, 60 hours a week. I was, I had no energy to do anything else but work and rest. And so that wasn't working for me. So I decided to quit my job and start pursuing my passions. But I didn't want to do it completely aimlessly. So I had to take a look at the market as well, and I found out it's pretty good. So the language learning market is growing every year, and it's one of the industries that was actually positively affected by the COVID pandemic, because a lot of people, I guess, were at home. They were looking for hobbies or new learning experiences. So for example, Duolingo alone just like doubled in signups during the month of March of 2020. So it's an industry that didn't have like this, sudden clash, and it's still growing. So, that looks pretty good. So I started planning, right? Okay, so what exactly I'm gonna do? Well, this is very risky, especially as a software engineer. The salaries are pretty good, so suddenly going from that to zero, like I needed to justify this choice with something a little bit more solid. So that's when I started to do my master's in computational linguistics, because I figured out I'm gonna try to develop my business while in the master's, and if it doesn't work out, I have a degree. Or maybe I will fail the degree, but then I'll have a business, or maybe both will work, maybe nothing will work. But I was trying to have a little bit more good cards in my sleeve. So that was the initial phase of my plan. And before I even had any idea of what I was going to do, the first thing I did was creating social media accounts. because I wanted to start gathering a community before I even had a product. And this is something that I really advise to anyone who is considering going through the same path. So I started by creating a language study account. I knew I wanted to create a language product. So I tried to start engaging with the language community. And I started doing this 1 year before I even started the programming side of things. So I had a language studying account. I was posting videos of me learning Greek at the time, and I started like having some followers. And those people were the first testers of my app when it came out, and this is really important. So again, if you are thinking of doing something similar to this, there's a step that I recommend reproducing because this works really well for me. Right. And then the next thing was the product ideation. So I knew I wanted to build something for language learning, but what exactly? At the time, I had no idea. I knew what my struggles were with in particular. So one of the challenges that I dealt with at the time was studying a language for a long time, and I could understand a lot, but as soon as I needed to say something, I would freeze. I mean, okay, part of that is due to the social anxiety, but I knew throughout the engagement with the language community that this was a common problem, right? A lot of people, they report the same experience, like, I can understand, but, you know, I making this jump from beginner to intermediate, and then especially at the intermediate stage, there seems to be some sort of plateau where a lot of people get stuck there and it starts getting demotivating, and then this going from conversational to fluent is really difficult. So I wanted to do something that worked for myself, and I figured that maybe if it worked for me, if it filled my need, it would fill the needs of other people who are also learning languages. So, as I said, this practicing, getting to talk and practicing is really tough, but it's something I really believe in, which is languaging, which is learning language through use. And there is lots of studies on second language acquisition that go on this line. Because in my opinion, like, learning a language is like riding a bike. You can learn about riding a bike by reading a book, and you can do that for a long time, and you'll know lots of things. But if you don't get on the bike, ride, fall, get on the bike again, fall again, and keep doing that, you're never gonna actually ride the bike, right? So right, I started looking at what my competitors were. So this was another phase of the process that I also encourage everyone doing, which is, you know, having a look at what's out there and try to find your niche. And one thing I noticed is that there were various kinds of apps. Of course, there are many apps that are not here, but roughly these are some of the most famous ones. And I could divide them in two groups. Ones that were basically like learning courses or language exposure, like reading, where you had not a lot of opportunity for creating your own sentences. So for example, in some of these apps, you have to reorganize words or you have to translate, but you are not actually thinking about creating your own sentences. You're not talking about the things that matter to you necessarily. You're not practicing the vocabulary that you find most relevant, that are about the things that, you know, you are passionate about. So there was that. And then on the complete other side of the spectrum, there were like this full unguided conversations with strangers. So, you know, Hello Talk, Tandem, these sort of like language exchange apps. And to me, it seems that going from here to here is a huge jump. So how do I go from just, doing word puzzles to like joining a full conversation? Also, like a little bit of a side note, like as a woman, sometimes the language exchange apps are not really that pleasant because a lot of people think they are Tinder for some reason. Also, the other problem about finding people to practice with is sometimes you get stuck in the same conversations over and over again. So, hello, how are you? What do you work with? And then if you don't stick with that partner and, keep talking to the same person, you're never gonna go into different topics. You're gonna have like the same basic conversation with a lot of different people, but you're not really gonna go outside of that. So this is some of the things that I struggled with and that I know some other people also have this issue. So yeah, so this is sort of the hole I wanted to fill. So I wanted to work on this particular niche, which was giving people an opportunity to practice with the least stress as possible, and something that would not be as hard as a full dialogue, but at the same time demands more creativity than reordering words or doing word puzzles. The other thing about this is that it has a good potential market-wise because Duolingo, for example, most of the courses, they go only until A2 level. Nowadays, there are some courses that go a bit further, but most of them go only until A2, more or less. And then you have millions of people who do those courses, and then they have nowhere to go afterwards. So if you do Duolingo for a while, and then you're looking for some practice, you can start doing Polygloss. One thing I considered at the time was how I was going to do that. And of course, given my specialty in my master's, doing chatbots was an option. But at the time, I noticed that the big players, like Duolingo, for example, they were not doing that. And I was wondering why. They did try creating a bot product a long time ago, and then they discontinued it because it didn't really work out. I'm not quite sure what are the reasons that it didn't work out for them, but for me specifically, I know that creating a chatbot for each individual language, at least at the time when I started this project, was not really feasible. Nowadays, it's a lot more feasible because the technology has improved a lot, but still making it language learning focused and making it able to do that in multiple languages will be a challenge because many of the languages that are not English are very under-resourced as well in the technology area. So you're gonna find NLP tools that are great for English, for Spanish, for French. As soon as you start dealing with something not even very obscure, but just slightly less used, you're gonna have an issue with finding the proper technologies to work with it. So that was something that made me go on a different direction. This is an example of a chatbot app. And as you can see, it got stuck. And I guess the experience can be the same as talking to customer service bots, where you're not talking to a real person. And sometimes you start getting frustrated with it. Just give me a real person, please. So I really did not want people in my app to deal with this issue. Right, so the MVP. How was I gonna go about that? And there are many ways to think about making a product. And this image sums up something that's very important to me, which is making people somewhat satisfied from the get-go. Like, let's say the goal of my product is to transport someone from A to B. And the best way of doing that would be building a car, right? And then, okay, how do I go about that? I could start making a wheel, and then another wheel, but it will take forever until the users get some value out of this. So the best way of doing this is, maybe I could do something that's maybe slightly less good, but somewhat works. Maybe it's buggy, but it does serve the purpose somewhat of moving someone from A to B, right? And then I can improve on it. Oh, okay, I have a skateboard that's not very good, it's slow, takes a lot of effort. A bike is a little bit better. Oh, no, a motorcycle, I don't have to do a lot of effort at all. I can just put gas in it, and then you go from there. So if you are thinking about making a product, please have this in mind and start delivering whatever value you can as early as you can. Right, so my inspirations for Polygloss and what helped me get to the idea. I'm gonna show you some of the apps soon, but I want first to give credit to everything that helped me get to the specific idea. And one of those things is a philosopher called Paulo Freire. He's a Brazilian philosopher who worked on critical pedagogy. So his work is more focused on literacy, on adult literacy, so it's not language teaching. But he does have a method of teaching literacy that is very successful, that's image-based. So he used images to get first people to talk about the things that were important to them. And then he used the vocabulary that these people used and constructed the lessons on the top of that. And by using this relevance, people were able to learn how to read and write much faster than normal. The other inspiration for Polygloss is Dixit, which is a board game. Can you raise your hand if you have played this game before? A lot of people, yes, amazing. For those who have not played Dixit, it's a board game where we have a set of very beautiful images, and you have to say something about it, and someone else in the group has to guess the correct image. Polygloss works very similar to that, but in a language learning context. What also helped me reach an idea for my product was the research of my colleagues during the masters, so also props to Photobook, which is research on getting the negotiation part, see how people negotiate when they disagree and when they try to find common ground. So, and this research was also on an image-based task, and using that as sort of a prompt to get this dialogue. Right, so I knew what I wanted to build then. I want to build a social image guessing game that has short texts with a communication purpose. So if I am writing about an image and I want you to guess which image is that, I'm talking to a real person, so my content is not going to avoid, it has some intent that is sent to another human. And it's very fast rounds with low stress. So, I say something, you guess the image, then it's your turn. And you say something, and I guess your image, and then that's it. That's the interaction. And then you can do that tons of times with tons of different people on tons of topics. You select a topic, or if you want to play with a specific person, you can select a friend. But you keep doing that, and then you can just practice, I can write 5 sentences today. So it's a little bit like writing a journal. You have like a small goal of the day. But at the same time, you are doing like this real interaction, right? And you have the total freedom to write creatively. So the field where you talk about the image, you can approach it, any way you want. It's a good way to practice. I'm gonna struggle with pronouncing this. Circumlocution? I think so, which is paraphrasing as well. So finding different ways of saying the same thing. So for example, let's say I'm a very beginner and I don't have a lot of vocabulary at all. And I could go like, I see a man with a yellow shirt and a red shirt. This is enough. I've done my purpose. So you don't need to be very sophisticated. If you make mistakes, that's okay. The point is sending a valid message that someone understands, right? The point is communicating something. And of course, if I am a little bit more savvy in the language, I can do trivias, I can do jokes. Some people do movie trivias. It's very interesting. You can go about it like any way you want. You can try to make it hard for the other person to guess. And then people can reward you with like different reactions. And also people can send corrections to each other. And there are some help if you are really stuck. So I use the database of the game itself to do this. So as people play more, I have a bunch of sentences connected to a particular image. And then with that, I can use natural language processing to get the most common words related to that image, the most common verbs. So I try separating the words in categories. So if you're really stuck, you can unlock the hints and you can try playing around with what I'm giving you. And that's it mostly. Oh, you can also send audio messages. You can record something. For now, this is a premium feature that I'm still testing and seeing how it works out. And so here's like an example of a match. So this is a Spanish match, and I selected the first image over there. And I can say, for example, something like, necesito sacar dinheiro, necesito buscar esta máquina. So I need to cash out some money, and I need to find this machine. And then the other person will have to guess between these 4 images which one I'm talking about, which is the first one. And then, for example, here, and then now it's the time for the other person to send me something. So, for example, este camión recoge la basura cada lunes. So this truck picks the trash every Monday. So that will be the image over there on the top right of the truck. And as you can see here, there are some different interactions that you can do with this message. So you can translate, you can keep feedback, so players can correct each other. You can give some awards, and then you can save this sentence for reviewing it later on. So let's say someone sends you something with a very interesting word that you haven't seen before. So you can save that, and then there are some other mini games you can play with these sentences. Right, so getting to development and launching. One part of what I was mentioning before about delivering value as early as possible is that you get to test as early as possible. So going on a project like this can be expensive. It's a big commitment, so you want to know if what you're doing actually is feasible, actually works. So the first test that I did of my app, actually, the app didn't exist yet at all. I used Google Form with the images and the rounds, so I simulated what would be this exchange, and I sent it to a bunch of people, and I asked them a bunch of questions about, do you think this will be helpful? Like, how do you think if, you could do this or you could do that? What would you like to see more in this kind of interaction? So try to test it like in analog ways, in whatever way you can. If you have an idea, figure out how to test it with actual people, and with people who are from the specific audience, but also with people who you do not expect will be the target audience, because sometimes you can be surprised about what kind of people it reaches, and also because at some point you're going to have to do marketing, and you're going to want to reach more people than your immediate friends and family. So yeah, you have to go and talk to strangers and get as much feedback as you can. The other thing about developing a startup and a product like this is that you have to be prepared to learn everything and to switch between all possible hats. So, I had to learn marketing, I had to learn social media management, content creation. So, my expertise is being a software engineer. So this is the part that was somewhat easy for me. But I recognize that if you are not a software engineer, this is the most expensive part to outsource. So in that case, I also recommend you finding people to partner with. So there is a website called indiehackers.com, where you can find people who are looking for projects, who are creating their own projects, and then maybe you can partner up. Because the thing is, so here's the thing, like I have to learn lots of these things, but this is way too much for a single person. So at some point, I end up being very overloaded and finding myself in the situation where I have to decide, okay, so either I fix this bug or I send this newsletter, or either I add this new feature or I start going on Facebook groups and inviting people to test my app. So, at some point, it's a time management job instead of a specific category job. And so you have to find ways to make this time commitment the most useful as possible. So since my expertise is in the programming side, it makes sense for me to do the programming and outsource the most that I can from the other areas. So, okay, I can do social media management, but ideally, I would partner up with someone who has more expertise in that. And then, like, both of our times, then we're making the most bang for our buck in this process. To give you a bit of a timeline of how this has been going for me, so I started the master's in 2019, and that's when I opened the social media accounts. At 2020 was when I had like a firm idea and started making the Android app. And then, started making all of the tests and talking to people. And 2021, I had the big launch, which was when the iOS app was ready. And only in 2022, I started working on monetizing. This is something that I do not recommend. I had to do it this way for particular reasons of what was happening to me, because when I initially made the app, it was part of my master's, and the goal was to get the data for my research. So the monetizing aspect was really non-essential, like it was gonna take time away from what I was doing at the time. But then as soon as I finished, it became like the top priority, because it was like, okay, now I'm done with the master's and I gotta figure out how to make this profitable. One question about if this sort of interaction works or not is that it does. So this was actually, a graph that you can find on my research. So what I was doing here was I was using large language models to see if I could identify if I could separate people from being beginners, intermediate speakers, or advanced speakers based on a text that they wrote, and then seeing if people were getting better after using Polygloss. And as you can see, for beginners and for advanced speakers, using the app didn't help much, but for people who were at the intermediate level, they have like significant improvements in the kind of language that they were producing after using the app for a while. My time is running up. I still have 5 minutes. Okay, perfect. Right, so what is the state of the app today? So what's going on? There has been lots of ups and downs, but I'm happy to say that there are a lot of people using the app. So I am pretty satisfied with the user base that I have so far and what's been going on. So people have sent over 500K messages so far in the app, lots of corrections. This is my favorite map ever, because there is almost like every corner of the world has like someone using Polygloss, and it just makes me really happy to look at this. And, oh, thank you. The other thing that makes me really, really happy is that for some reason, this was totally random, the top language of the app is Welsh. Because normally when someone makes like a language learning product, they do like learn English, learn French, Spanish, the famous ones. And then the minority languages really don't have tools. So what happened here was that since the app is completely image-based, it can in theory be used in any language. And when I say any language, I mean any language. At some point, there were 2 people playing in a conlang that they invented, because the language option is in the app is completely free text, so you can go there and just insert your language. And as long as there are 2 people with the same language, the app will match you up and it will allow you to play with each other. So far, there have been 175 languages used. This is insane. This is completely bonkers. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Although I have to say that some of them are dialect variations of each other. So for example, European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese would be 2 different entries in here. But this is still a lot, and it's amazing. I love seeing the app being used for Welsh, for Scottish Gaelic, for Hebrew. Here, like Tokipona is the biggest. Oh no, actually, this is average per player. So the High Valyrian players, they are more active than the Tokipona community, but the Tokipona community has lots of players who have, exchanged lots of messages. So it's pretty cool. However, there are some very big challenges. Because people are playing with each other, there needs to be some sort of like critical mass in each language. Otherwise, it can take a long time for people to get a reply on the messages, and that could be demotivating. So if you want to use Polygloss to practice a minority language, please do invite as many people as you can. And the other One of the other very important challenges is monetizing and funding. So this is the current state of the finances of the app. So by the way, every information about the project, I have it very out in the open. If you go on the websites, on the very bottom, there is a link to our Notion workspace, and everything is open to everyone. So there are some people who have paid for the subscription. So there are, today I looked and the number had gone up to 60, so thank you to whoever subscribed. So there are 60, in fact, active regular subscribers, and then there are some more people who have paid for the lifetime access, who is not, which is not counted here. So there are 70 people who have paid for that. So this is amazing. That means that a lot of people found value in my app enough to spend money on it. But at the same time, it's, you know, not something that I can rely on. So I have to figure out different ways of continue working on this project since it's not enough to sustain me. So what did I do so far? One of the things that I've did was doing freelance jobs and working part-time on the app. In these years, there have been periods where I didn't work in the app at all because I was working on something else so that I could get money to then work on the app. And there were periods that I was working on it full-time. So since January to now, I've been working on it full-time. And now, from the middle of the year onwards, because now the app has reached a somewhat stable state in terms of developments. So now it's time to focus on other specialties. You know, there's time to focus on marketing and in other areas of the project. So I figured, okay, I'm gonna go back to the industry and work as a software developer because then I can get paid and then I can pay other people to do things. So these are my financial plans for moving forward. And I'm gonna skip this part because I'm running out of time. And I wanna ask you to download it and please give me feedback. All kinds of feedback are useful. Tomorrow, I'm gonna pick the best feedback of all and I'm gonna give a book as a gift. So I'm gonna do this at noon tomorrow. This is a book about language diversity and minority languages, specifically indigenous languages of Latin America. I did not write this, I just like this book a lot and I want to share it with someone else. And yeah, I have a bunch of stuff there at the entrance, like stickers. If you live in a sticker-friendly city, please feel free to grab as many as you want and spread the love of Polygloss around. And also, I am looking for collaborators, co-founders, investors. If you think this project is interesting, if you want to join, or if you just want to talk to me and pick my brain, if you just want to collaborate, please, I'll be in the corridors. I'll be here I'll be in Prague until Tuesday, actually, because I'll be visiting some things. And I'm specifically looking also for language teachers who want to test Polygloss in the context of a classroom. So if you're a language teacher and you would like to use it with your students, please come talk to me. And that's it. Thank you. So, questions. How did you keep your community on social medias attracted while the app still wasn't ready? I don't know, I just kept posting. As I said, I did not know a single thing about social media management. I was just a person being honest about my journey, and I was regularly posting my study progress. I was posting videos of me, like recordings of me practicing Greek. And, you know, I sucked. I wasn't very good at it. But, you know, I was just out there and I was interacting with people. People would leave me like lots of compliments on my very bad Greek. So it was also very fun for me to do this. And my goal was always for me to keep my own interest. Because as I said in the very beginning of the talk, I am neurodivergent. So if I'm not interested in something, I'm gonna drop it. So it needs to be fun for me and keep my interest. And I figured that if I find it cool, maybe someone else in the world also finds it cool. And I have done this ever since. And this actually worked quite well for me so far. Next question, what language is the app written in? It's written in Dart, so I use the Flutter framework for the front end of the app, and I use Firebase for the backend. When is Polygloss getting a web version? I type very slowly on my phone versus using a keyboard, so that's why I stopped using Polygloss. That's a very good point, and I really appreciate the feedback. So I started working on a web version a long time ago, and then I stopped because the Flutter framework initially was made for exporting to iOS and Android only, and the web exporting was still not very stable at the time, was very buggy, and I figured I would be fighting against the current there. You know, it was too early in the process of Flutter at the time for me to do this. However, right now that web exporting is a lot better than before, so I'm gonna give it a shot again, but I don't really have a timeline for when it's coming up. What I can say, however, is that at the premium version, you can record an audio and send, so that's less work. How many people does your company employ at the moment? So that is 0 because I have no money, but I did have lots of collaborators from the beginning, and that stayed with the project for a temporary amount of time. So at some point, I did get an award from my university for entrepreneurship, and that was at the time £3,000. And I used that to get an intern. I also used another award that I got later on to do some marketing. And there was a friend who was switching careers from cinema to software engineering, and she was an unpaid intern at the time, and she got a software developing job full-time afterwards. So, you know, it was a win-win situation. Yeah, but employment, unfortunately, I have not had the budget for that so far. What is current money spending on the app overall or monthly? So, I used to spend more money on it because of Firebase, but it isn't a lot. So overall was about €100 per month, and most of that was the newsletter system. Because in terms of servers and backend, the most that I spent on it was €20 a month. And then there are like other costs, like keeping my email address and the domain name. I have to register. It's like once per year, and then like the Apple developer certificate, which is like €75 one time. I don't recall exactly. So I would say that overall it would be about €100 a month for the minimum spends. But then, of course, if I want to do any marketing, no, there goes €500. So just for maintaining the app alive, it's €100. If I want to reduce costs, I could by just stopping to send newsletters, and then I would reduce that, I think, to €40 a month. Right. Do you see ChatGPT as a threat to language learning apps in general? It can teach any language like a teacher with examples and grammatical explanations. So honestly, I don't know, because of course ChatGPT can be very useful, and I'm certain that it can fill particular niches, but having it completely like personalized to your whole journey, this is something that AI still struggles with, and I think is still gonna struggle with for a while. So there's no replacement, for example, for a teacher yet. So this is like one example that I think is unreplaceable. It could threat some language apps, but it could also help some language apps. So, I've actually considered using ChatGPT as part of Polygloss. This is something that I have in mind as a possibility for the future. I just feed all of your text to an AI, and then it will tell me like, these are your most common mistakes. Maybe it could help with that. So, it's a threat or a tool. It all depends. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And guys, I saw that you have plenty of questions, but we ran out of time, so feel free to find Etienne and ask her directly.